If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 201. This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 201. How dare you? Bubble spoke coldly, crossing her arms as if preparing to summon her familiar. But before she could finish her incantation, a massive, sturdy, light yellow rock spine suddenly emerged in her field of vision and slammed into her head. Thunk! Her head snapped back, and she collapsed to the ground. Before her vision blurred entirely, she vaguely heard a single sentence. "Let's tie her up first." When her vision returned, she found herself tightly bound, lying in the central square of a camp. In front of her, Luo Qing and his companions were busy writing something on a blackboard they'd procured from who knows where. She instinctively wanted to get angry but paused when she heard a quiet voice beside her. "Lady Bubble, you're awake." She turned her head and saw that nearly all members of the Teyvat tribe had been bound and gathered in the square. A commotion stirred among the crowd as they noticed their leader regain consciousness. Luo Qing, hearing the noise, turned around. Seeing that Bubble had woken up, he didn't seem surprised. Clearing his throat, he greeted the crowd with enthusiasm. "I'm Luo Qing. Greetings to all my dear friends of the Teyvat tribe." Bubble's frustration +1. Azarig's frustration +1. Luo Qing, satisfied with the strong reaction from his audience, nodded approvingly and continued. "The academia has heard that, due to the harsh desert environment, you folks haven't established a proper education system. Grand Sage Azar is deeply concerned about this and has personally instructed us to bring you some warmth and guidance. We're here to help you build a strong learning system, improve your personal character, embrace new ideals, and become model citizens of the new era. Aren't you all excited?" Bubble's frustration +1. Azarig's frustration +1. Raised frustration +1. "Lady Bubble, what do we do now?" whispered one of the tribe members, unable to stand Luo Qing's infuriating grin any longer. Many of them had been minding their own business earlier when Luo Qing and his crew suddenly approached, asking if they wanted to embrace new ideals and become model citizens. Those who dared to decline were immediately knocked unconscious and tied up. Even when others realized Luo Qing's group had come to pick a fight and tried to resist, they were easily subdued in a few moves, unable to land a single counterattack. Some even attempted to flee, only to black out before leaving the camp. Eventually, every member of the Teyvat tribe in the camp was captured and dumped in the square together. "For now, don't act rashly," Bubble whispered. As someone who had climbed to her position through grit and survival, she understood the value of patience. She would wait for the right moment to take Luo Qing down. "Yes, Lady Bubble." Hearing her command, the Teyvat tribe members quieted down and turned their attention to Luo Qing. To foster a strong learning environment, Luo Qing began, "I'm introducing a new schedule. From today onward, everyone must wake up at 6 a.m. sharp. 6:15 morning exercises. 6:45 breakfast. 8:30 p.m. evening exercises. 10:30 p.m. lights out. Additionally, each of you must write a daily reflection on new ideals, with a minimum of 5,000 words." By the time he finished, the Teyvat tribe, including Bubble, was utterly bewildered. Was this some new form of punishment? Well then, if anyone has suggestions, feel free to bring them up. As your teaching director, I'll do my best to accommodate. Bubble raised her hand cautiously. "I'd like to ask, what exactly are these new ideals and what does it mean to become a model citizen?" Despite knowing Luo Qing's group was physically superior, Bubble decided to bide her time and play along until an opportunity to counterattack presented itself. "Ah, an excellent question from student Bubble." Luo Qing gave her a thumbs up, clearly pleased. "In short, new ideals mean keeping up with the times here in Teyvat. Let go of outdated traditions, avoid unnecessary scheming, be honest, treat others kindly, and foster unity. To become a model citizen means working together for Sumeru's brighter future." The members of the Teyvat tribe weren't the only ones struggling to keep their composure. Even Natalia and Rosalind from Luo Qing's crew found it hard to suppress their reactions. What exactly had gotten into him? Still, recalling how the Harbinger had once described Luo Qing's talents in manipulating minds, they reasoned that this was probably part of some greater plan. "Excuse me, Luo Qing. Correction, from now on, address me as teaching director." Luo Qing interrupted. "Fine. Teaching director. The tribe still needs to hunt and trade resources to survive. This schedule might. Of course, the schedule is merely a reference. Adjustments can be made as necessary. Hearing this, Bubble felt a bit relieved. As the tribe leader, she had to ensure the tribe's daily operations continued smoothly. Otherwise, starvation was inevitable in the harsh desert. But just as she began to relax, Luo Qing added with a grin. However, the daily 5,000 word reflection and morning and evening exercises are non-negotiable. Bubble's frustration +1. Well then, Luo Qing clapped his hands, let's start with step 1, learning the morning and evening exercises. With a thought, the ropes binding the tribe members vanished, reabsorbed into his control. The sudden freedom startled the Tanit tribe members. Was Luo Qing not worried about them rising up against him? Even Bubble hesitated, debating whether to rally everyone for an attack. Before she could decide, a man from the back grabbed a weapon from the ground and charged at Luo Qing. You've gone too far. Before he could reach Luo Qing, a light yellow rock spine materialized near his abdomen, sending him flying backward. He collapsed in a heap, unconscious and foaming at the mouth. Everyone froze in place, swallowing nervously as they turned to look at Luo Qing. Eyes narrowed, he smiled. Dear students, I strongly advise against challenging the teaching director. The consequences are quite severe. Chapter 202, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 202. Several days passed. Under Luo Qing's oppressive rule, the members of the Tanit tribe had no choice but to follow the schedule he imposed on them. Every morning, they had to wake up early and gather at the ruins square to perform a strange dance that Natalia had taught them. To make matters worse, the music from the oversized gramophone was painfully off-key, and the awkward movements of the dance were nothing compared to the elegance of the eremites' techniques. After dancing, they were forced to chant slogans like "Embrace new ideals, become model citizens," and every night, they had to write a 5,000 word reflection on these so-called new ideals. Many of them, being desert dwellers who had rarely even held a pen, were at a complete loss when it came to writing reflections. It was pure mental torture. After just a few days, some tribe members were already feeling delirious, their lives devoid of hope. Of course, they had considered rebelling. But Luo Qing's immense strength made it clear that careful preparation was necessary to take him down in one decisive move. Despite the mandatory morning exercises, evening drills, and nightly reflections, Luo Qing didn't closely monitor them during the day. Life otherwise carried on as usual except for the strict requirement to return to the camp by lights out. Anyone who failed to do so would face an additional 5,000 word reflection and be forbidden to sleep until it was completed. Bubble used every hunting trip as an opportunity to send messengers to other tribes through Azarig. She portrayed Luo Qing as a heartless tyrant, a villain who enslaved men and turned women into, well, victims of unspeakable treatment. She urged the other tribes to prepare for an all-out assault on Luo Qing, framing it as a fight for survival. Tonight, as everyone was gathered to do their homework, to write their reflections, Bubble discreetly surrounded herself with her most loyal confidants, discussing how to overthrow Luo Qing. What's the word from the other tribes? Lady Bubble, they've agreed to help. But they demand an additional 30% share of future resource exchanges, Azarig whispered, glancing nervously toward Luo Qing's guards, who were holding ominous black weapons. One of them, a blonde-haired girl, glanced in their direction. Azarig immediately ducked his head and pretended to obediently write his reflection, his large hands awkwardly gripping a small pen. This can't go on any longer. When will they be ready to act? Bubble bit the tip of her pen, utterly uninterested in the nonsense she was supposed to be writing. Just thinking about Luo Qing's treatment of her these past few days made her blood boil. She was the tribe's leader. How could she be forced to endure the same humiliating tasks as ordinary tribe members? If all goes according to plan, tomorrow night, combined, the tribes should be able to summon at least 50 vengeful spirits. Everyone will be in position, waiting for your signal, Azarig murmured as he continued to write. Good, very good. Bubble felt a surge of relief. This nightmare was finally coming to an end. Once Luo Qing was captured, she would make sure he suffered as much as she had, even more. As she fantasized about her vengeance, a loud voice interrupted her thoughts. Time's up. Hand in your reflections, one by one. The command came from Natalia, the blonde-haired girl, who seemed just as puzzled as anyone else about Luo Qing's insistence on these bizarre nightly assignments. Still, as his subordinate, she had no choice but to comply. At her order, the tribe members began lining up to submit their work. Natalia meticulously reviewed each one, her sharp eyes scanning for any shortfalls. Anyone who failed to meet the 5,000 word requirement would face a harsh penalty. They'd not only have to write another 5,000 words but also endure a public flogging shirtless, of course before being hung up for the entire camp to see. Seated beside Natalia, Rosalind idly played with her fingers. If anyone dared to cause trouble, she was more than willing to turn them into either an ice sculpture or a pile of ashes. Her loyalty and warmth were reserved exclusively for Luo Qing. To everyone else, she remained the haughty and merciless Crimson Witch of Flames. Though the members of the Tanit tribe were tough in their own right, they were no match for a former Fatui Harbinger. At the back of the line, Bubble was beginning to panic. She had been so absorbed in daydreaming about her revenge that she'd forgotten to write her reflection. Azarig. Bubble whispered urgently, glancing toward Natalia and Rosalind, who were busy reviewing submissions. Let me borrow yours. Hey. Azarig looked confused. You didn't write yours? No. Azarig hesitated. If he gave Bubble his reflection, he'd have nothing to submit. He'd seen firsthand what happened to those who failed to hand in their work, the whippings, the public humiliation, the sleepless nights. Even though he was Bubble's subordinate, his loyalty wasn't exactly unwavering. Well. Lady Bubble, the weather's quite nice tonight, isn't it? Before Bubble could respond, Azarig bolted toward Natalia, cheerfully exclaiming, Teacher! Please check my reflection for its unwavering sincerity. Don't rush, don't rush. One at a time, Natalia replied, stifling a laugh. Was the tribe really so broken that they were this eager to submit their homework? Azarig, you traitorous fool! Bubble hissed under her breath. Her suspicion had been correct, Azarig wasn't entirely loyal. Still, she needed his strength to deal with Luo Qing, so she swallowed her anger for now. Since Azarig wouldn't help, Bubble turned to another target, a young boy from the tribe. Ret, how many words did you write? 5,001, Lady Bubble, the boy stammered, clearly nervous at being addressed by the tribe's leader. Good. Bubble nodded approvingly. Ret, give me your reflection. But. Lady Bubble, I. Don't worry, Ret. Once Luo Qing is dealt with tomorrow, I'll reward you handsomely for your loyalty. But. Ret hesitated. If he gave his reflection to Bubble, he'd have nothing to submit. That meant an extra 5,000 words, a whipping, and a sleepless night. What's wrong? Bubble's tone shifted to a subtle threat. Are you defying your leader? Do you want to betray the tribe? I wouldn't dare. Then hand it over. Yes, Lady Bubble. Reluctantly, Ret handed over his reflection, his hands trembling as he watched Bubble take it. Just as she turned to leave, a voice interrupted them. Well, what's this? The two froze as they turned toward the speaker. Copying homework, are we? Chapter 203, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 203 Xmas. Merry Christmas. Both Bubble and Ret froze, their hands awkwardly suspended in midair. Following the sound of the voice, Bubble turned to see Luo Qing looking at them with a smile that radiated faux kindness. Bubble's frustration +1. Ret's frustration +1. After several days of relentless torment under Luo Qing's bizarre regime, Bubble now felt a pang of frustration every time she even saw him. Well. Trying to snatch someone's homework, are we, Bubble? Luo Qing's gaze fell on the sheet of reflection paper in Ret's hand, and everything became clear. With a hearty slap on Ret's shoulder, he said enthusiastically, Now, my dear student, tell your teaching director was Bubble here trying to steal your homework. Ret stammered, caught between loyalty to his tribe and the truth. As a member of the Tanit tribe, he couldn't bring himself to side with Luo Qing. He was about to come up with an excuse when Luo Qing patted his shoulder again and said with a magnanimous tone. Don't worry, student. I can see the honesty in your eyes. There's no need to explain, I understand everything. Rest assured, you won't be punished. Go on and hand in your homework. Before Ret could say another word, Luo Qing gave him a push, sending him stumbling toward Natalia, who was checking the assignments. And now? Luo Qing turned back, his smile widening. Bubble, do you have anything else to say? Bubble's frustration +1. Bubble glanced around and noticed that the other tribe members who had already submitted their work were gathered nearby, quietly watching the drama unfold. These traitors! She fumed internally. Always going on about how we're family, but the moment trouble arises, they scatter like cowards. Why are you looking at the others? Luo Qing pretended to scold her. Bubble, where is your 5,000 word reflection for today? I didn't write it, she admitted reluctantly. Why not? Do you not like writing reflections? Luo Qing tilted his head with mock concern. Are you seriously asking that? Bubble fumed inwardly. You do realize there are consequences for failing to complete your work, don't you? Luo Qing's voice grew sharper. Bubble hesitated, her mind racing. Tomorrow night, she needed to lead the allied tribes in a surprise attack on Luo Qing. If she ended up getting tied up and whipped tonight, she'd be in no condition to move, let alone fight. No choice. I'll have to play along for now. Steeling herself, Bubble stepped closer to Luo Qing, softening her voice until it practically dripped with honey. Director Luo, I wasn't feeling well today, so I didn't get around to writing my reflection. Can you let me off just this once? As she leaned in close, she whispered into his ear, if you spare me tonight, I'll do whatever you want, anything at all. To her credit, Bubble's sultry tone was quite convincing. Unfortunately for her, Luo Qing had a harem of beauties back in his domain, any one of whom could outshine her seductive act. Still, her efforts were distracting. Feigning interest, Luo Qing raised an eyebrow. Oh? Anything at all? Anything, Bubble purred, pressing herself against his arm for good measure. Great. In that case, go wait for me in my office, Luo Qing said with a grin. Gladly, Bubble replied, casting a smug glance at Natalia and Rosalind before sashaying off toward Luo Qing's quarters. For the sake of tomorrow's plan, she was willing to endure anything tonight. Master, you're not seriously going to? Natalia approached Luo Qing after finishing her rounds, her expression concerned. Going to what? Luo Qing asked nonchalantly. You know, that. Master, that woman is bad news. You can't trust her. Why not? Luo Qing raised an eyebrow. Her walk. Chimed in Sergei, one of his subordinates. The way she sways her hips, total schemer. No way she's up to anything good. Oh, Sergei, I didn't realize you were such an expert on women. Luo Qing smirked. Sergei hesitated before blurting out, well, master, neither are you. Luo Qing's face darkened. Without a word, he clapped Sergei on the shoulder. Tonight, you'll be doing 50 rounds of square dancing. No sleep until you're finished. As Sergei stood there, stunned, Luo Qing turned and strode off toward his quarters, leaving the hapless subordinate wondering where he'd gone wrong. Meanwhile, in Luo Qing's quarters, originally Bubble's room and the cleanest, most luxurious space in the camp, Bubble was waiting. She knew better than to try to assassinate Luo Qing, his strength was undeniable, and such an attempt would likely fail. In the harsh desert culture, physical intimacy was often seen as just another tool for survival. Bubble was prepared to use her body as a means to endure tonight and secure her plans for tomorrow. When Luo Qing finally entered, she greeted him with a coy smile. Director Luo, you've finally arrived. Luo Qing looked her up and down, smirking. So, you said you'd do anything I wanted tonight. That's right, Bubble cooed, her voice dripping with seduction. Anything you desire, I'm all yours. Perfect, Luo Qing replied. Bubble reached for the ties of her robe, ready to play her part. But before she could go further, Luo Qing's voice stopped her. Wait. What are you doing? Taking off my clothes. Bubble froze, confused. Why? Luo Qing's expression remained neutral. Is this some weird new kink? Bubble wondered. Well, if you prefer I keep them on, that's fine too. She murmured, feigning shyness. Just as she was about to lean closer, Luo Qing interrupted again. All right, let's get started. Finally, Bubble thought, steeling herself. Start jumping, Luo Qing ordered casually. Hey! Didn't you hear me? Start doing the morning exercises. Don't stop until I tell you to. Bubble stared at him in disbelief. At this hour? With this atmosphere? You want me to exercise? Do you have a problem with that? Luo Qing's tone sharpened. Bubble clenched her fists, her body trembling with suppressed rage. This bastard! Sure, I look good, but you really think I'd stoop this low just to seduce someone like you? No problem, she muttered through gritted teeth. She'd endure. She had to. But in her mind, she vowed, tomorrow night, Luo Qing, the first thing I'll do is castrate you. Chapter 204, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 204 Xmas. Merry Christmas. The night passed, and under Luo Qing's relentless command, Bubble spent the entire evening performing square dances in his room. By the time she stumbled out the next morning, her legs were trembling, and she had to cling to the walls just to stay upright. Her weakened state did not go unnoticed by the members of the Tanit tribe. They exchanged shocked glances, their imaginations running wild. Was Luo Qing truly that powerful? After all, when their tribal leaders sought companionship in the past, it was usually the man who hobbled out the next day. But now, she was the one clinging to the walls. Exhausted beyond measure, Bubble had no choice but to lie down in her room for the entire day, conserving her strength for her plans to exact revenge against Luo Qing that night. As the tribal matriarch, she rarely participated in labor anyway, so no one questioned her absence. The day slipped by, and as night fell, it was time for the tribe's nightly routine gathering in the square to perform 2 rounds of their absurd, hideous dance, followed by sitting in neat rows to write their so-called reflections on new ideals. Only after completing the assignments could they rest. Bubble's plan with Azarig and the other allied tribes was timed to coincide with the nightly gathering. Weapons had been hidden earlier, ready to be retrieved during the chaos of battle. Bubble and Azarig had even downplayed Luo Qing's strength to the other tribes, hoping to weaken their forces in the process. As the stars dotted the desert sky, Bubble finally emerged from her room. Though Luo Qing had generously spared her from the morning exercises, she still had to participate in the evening's writing session. Once everyone had assembled in the square, Bubble called her closest confidants over for a quick, whispered meeting. When will they arrive? Soon, Lady Bubble. Any moment now. Azarig glanced at her with concern. Lady Bubble, you seem still unsteady. Perhaps I should take charge of tonight's operation. The thought of Luo Qing leaving Bubble in such a weakened state made Azarig's heart ache. After all, he hadn't yet had the honor of being chosen for her attentions. No need, Bubble snapped. I'll personally make sure Luo Qing understands. Her gaze locked onto Luo Qing, who stood not far away, laughing and chatting with his subordinates. Her eyes burned with hatred. She could have tolerated a fight to the death, but to force her to dance all night long? And threaten her with public flogging if she refused? Everyone's here. Form 5 orderly rows. Natalia barked out the command, prompting Sergei and another subordinate to haul out the large gramophone. Rosalind stood nearby, maintaining a watchful guard to prevent any disruptions. Just then, shadows began to appear along the cliffs surrounding the camp. Figures clad in the distinct armor of the Eremites emerged, their numbers quickly growing as they lined the edges of the cliffs. Wait! Natalia's gaze flicked to the red-clad warriors. Turning back toward Luo Qing, who was leisurely humming a tune and sketching on a piece of paper, she called out, Master Luo Qing, maybe now isn't the time to be drawing. They've called reinforcements. Natalia rushed to his side as Sergei and another guard took up defensive positions near their leader. Rosalind, however, remained unconcerned, her calm demeanor unshaken. You're all so tense, Luo Qing said, not even looking up. I'm on a roll with this sketch. Let me finish first. The paper in his hands contained a design for a sleek, modern combat suit he had imagined a gift to a certain someone. If realized, it could boost attack speed by at least 50%. Meanwhile, on the cliffs, the reinforcements sneered at the sight of Luo Qing's group. Really, Bubble? 5 people? You couldn't even put up a fight against 5 people? And you call yourselves desert warriors? One voice jeered. Exactly. You might as well disband your tribe now, another chimed in mockingly. Bubble's lip curled. If you're so confident, then by all means, go ahead. Show me what you're capable of. The Eremite warriors began leaping down from the cliffs, quickly surrounding Luo Qing and his companions in the square. TCH, all this for 5 people, one of the Eremite leaders scoffed, stepping forward. He was a towering man wielding a massive trident, the weapon glowing faintly with geo-energy. His gaze lingered on Rosalind, who stood poised and unbothered in the center of the square. She was striking her figure an enticing blend of curves and elegance, her aura exuding cold arrogance. That one's mine. Don't any of you dare touch her. The man declared before charging forward, trident raised. Even through his mask, he could sense her innate haughtiness, and it stirred a primal urge to conquer her. But reality fell short of his ambition. Before he could close the distance, Rosalind raised her hand, and a pillar of ice shot forth, instantly freezing the man solid. A moment later, the ice shattered, leaving only fragments of his body scattered on the ground. Pathetic, Rosalind muttered, stepping forward with the grace of a predator. Her very presence seemed to cow the surrounding warriors. If this is the best you've got, I suggest you all come at me together. Her words struck a nerve. Don't get cocky, woman. Fine, let's see if you can handle all of us at once. Desert hardened and experienced in battle, the Eremites had no qualms about fighting unfairly. At their leader's command, dozens of warriors summoned their shadowy familiars, sending them charging toward Rosalind. Some warriors hung back, loosing arrows and elemental projectiles from a distance, hoping to exploit any opening. Rosalind let out a soft, derisive hum as she moved forward, her steps as deliberate as a dance. The air around her grew heavy with pyro energy. Crimson flame seeped from her skin, her eyes burning with an ominous red glow. The Eremites and their familiars closed in from all directions. Arrows, elemental blasts, and snarling beasts hurtled toward her. Desert fools! Feel the flames, Rosalind whispered. She swept her hands outward, and a vortex of crimson flames erupted around her, forming a spiraling inferno. The fiery whirlwind not only nullified the incoming projectiles but also surged into the advancing horde, consuming warriors and familiars alike. Agonized screams echoed through the square as the flames devoured their targets. From her vantage point in the crowd, Bubble stood frozen in shock. This. She had assumed Luo Qing was the primary threat, and that Rosalind, despite possessing a vision, was merely a lesser concern. But now she understood. Even without Luo Qing lifting a finger, this one woman alone, she could annihilate the entire tribe. Chapter 205, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 205. Rosalind, now wielding the cryo-vision gifted by Luo Qing, had become a far more formidable force than she once was. In the past, the icy power she controlled was merely a tool to suppress the cursed flames within her, a precarious balance of elements that allowed her to use only one at a time. Now, empowered by the vision, her mastery over cryo had grown exponentially. She could wield both cryo and pyro simultaneously, a duality that transformed her into a true force of destruction. It quickly became clear that even the combined strength of the allied desert tribes, every warrior and shadow beast they could muster, was no match for the former Fatui Harbinger. One by one, Rosalind buried her enemies in fire and ice with ease, maintaining precise control so as not to disturb Luo Qing, who remained seated at the edge of the square, sketching away. From the moment the battle began, the tribes had no chance of victory. When Rosalind wiped out nearly a third of their forces, the remaining warriors began to waver. Fear and despair crept into their hearts, eclipsing any will to fight. Finally, they understood. So this is why Bubble didn't resist. She hadn't been cowardly, just sensible. The woman they'd foolishly provoked wasn't someone they could afford to cross. Why did we even try? As their resolve crumbled, the tribes began to consider retreat. But Rosalind saw through their intentions immediately. With a wave of her hand, a towering wall of flames erupted around the battlefield, cutting off any chance of escape. You have two choices, she said, her cold voice carrying across the square. Hovering in midair, she looked down on the warriors like a queen addressing her subjects or a predator taunting her prey. Kneel, or die. While she understood that Luo Qing needed these people alive, she also knew desert tribes only bowed to power. Without making an example, there was no way they'd submit willingly. The leaders of the tribes exchanged hesitant glances. To kneel would be humiliating, a blow to their pride as proud desert warriors. But to refuse, would likely cost them their lives. Fools! Seeing their hesitation, Rosalind let out a derisive snort. She raised her hand, conjuring another flaming whirlwind that sent more of their comrades screaming in agony. Stop! We surrender! A trembling voice rose above the chaos. A warrior threw down his weapon and dismissed his summoned beast. Better to live and fight another day than die here for nothing. Soon, the rest of the warriors followed suit, laying down their arms and kneeling in submission. Pathetic, Rosalind muttered, descending gracefully to the ground. Her disdainful expression softened as she approached Luo Qing, her every movement radiating deference. Master, she said, her tone shifting to one of respect and gentleness. The situation has been dealt with. The tribesmen stared in disbelief, their minds reeling. What? This fearsome witch serves him. If Rosalina's power was already beyond their comprehension, then what kind of monster must Luo Qing be? Oh! Luo Qing finally looked up from his sketch, his eyes shifting between Rosalind and his drawing. He compared the proportions thoughtfully. About the same size. Rosalind, what do you think? He'd been using her as a reference for the figure in his design, a modern, streamlined battlesuit he'd envisioned for a certain someone. Master, your depiction is very accurate, Rosalind replied, though a faint sadness flickered in her heart. She had fought so fiercely, yet Luo Qing's only interest was in his sketch. Not even a word of praise for her efforts. Since you think so, Natalia, take this, Luo Qing said, handing the design to Natalia. Find someone to make it when we get back. Yes, Master Luo Qing, Natalia replied, her expression unreadable as she accepted the blueprint. Having finished his work, Luo Qing stretched lazily and stood, surveying the rows of kneeling tribesmen with satisfaction. Turning to Rosalind, he flashed her a smile. Well done, Rosalind. Bringing Rosalind over from the Tsaritsa had proven a worthwhile move. She was the perfect tool for situations like this. After all, if his subordinates could handle things on their own, why should he dirty his hands? Thank you for the compliment, Master. Rosalind said with a bow, though her voice carried a tinge of melancholy. But you did kill a bit too many, Luo Qing added, glancing at the battlefield littered with ice sculptures and charred corpses. Try to hold back next time. All these wasted lives. That's so much potential frustration value gone to waste. Yes, Master. Rosalind murmured, chastened. Luo Qing noticed the faint cracks on her shoulder, remnants of the cursed flame strain on her body. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a small glowing pill and tossed it to her. Take this. Don't let those injuries linger. Yes, Master. Rosalind accepted the pill, her mood lifting slightly. She knew Luo Qing's gesture was practical, but the thought that he might care for her well-being brought a small smile to her face. Meanwhile, Luo Qing strolled through the square, weaving between the kneeling tribesmen. They dared not look up at him, their heads bowed in silent fear, hoping to escape his attention. When he reached Babel, he stopped. Babel had surrendered early, ensuring the survival of most of her tribe. Even so, her head hung low, her body trembling. You disappoint me, Babel, Luo Qing said flatly. What's the matter? Not a fan of embracing new ideals and becoming a model citizen. Babel's frustration +1. Master Luo Qing, I was wrong. Babel pleaded, pressing her forehead to the ground. Please, spare us. From now on, we'll dedicate ourselves to your teachings. We'll embrace new ideals and strive to become the best citizens we can be. I swear it. Her once proud demeanor as the tribe's matriarch had completely crumbled. All she wanted now was to avoid further punishment. The other tribesmen listened, bewildered. New ideals? Model citizens? What kind of bizarre punishment is this? Pathetic, Luo Qing muttered, reaching down to remove Babel's blindfold. Their eyes met briefly before Babel averted her gaze, unable to hide the fear in her expression. I won't kill you, Luo Qing said dismissively, standing back up. Thank you, Master. Babel whispered, her voice trembling. Natalia, handle the newcomers like we did before, Luo Qing ordered. Yes, Master Luo Qing. With that, Luo Qing waved a hand and turned to leave. I'm heading back to finish my sketch. You all can deal with the rest. Luo Qing's goal had never been slaughter, it was frustration. Killing everyone would be wasteful when they could still serve a purpose. As for the Eremites, they had only themselves to blame. Their gods had long since fallen, leaving them no one to protect them. Chapter 206, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 206. A month passed. Since Rosalina's overwhelming display of power, the members of the Teyvat tribe had abandoned all thoughts of rebellion. Even Babel, once defiant, seemed to have resigned herself to the harsh reality. She obediently followed Luo Qing's schedule, waking early for morning exercises and dutifully completing her nightly reflections. This dreary routine had taken a visible toll on her, leaving her looking worn and frail. She no longer knew when or if this nightmare would end. Her authority within the Teyvat tribe also dwindled day by day. If Luo Qing and his group stayed for another few months, her reputation as the tribe's matriarch might be irreparably damaged. After all, what was the point of her title? She was no different from the rest of them, dancing earnestly at the front of the group during exercises, jumping with vigor at Luo Qing's insistence. The other tribe's people, once deferential, began to lose their respect for her. Meanwhile, Luo Qing had grown accustomed to the steady flow of frustration value delivered by his new captives. Over the month, he had amassed enough to perform another 90 pull session. However, as humans tend to adapt, the frustration value generated by the tribe's people had gradually diminished. They had become accustomed to the rigid schedule, the 5,000 word reflections, and Luo Qing's strict rules. Now that they followed his commands without question, there was little left for him to gain. Seeing no reason to linger, Luo Qing decided to return to Samura City, leaving Rosalind, Natalia, and the others behind to maintain order for another month before regrouping. True to his belief in the importance of spiritual balance and good fortune, Luo Qing intended to find a new feng shui hotspot to perform his next round of pulls. After utilizing Time Zero's acceleration, Luo Qing arrived in Samura City in record time. Wasting no effort, he rushed straight to his residence, eager to visit the chosen spot he had prepared earlier. But when he pushed open the door, the house was empty. Hey? Where is everyone? Puzzled, Luo Qing searched upstairs, checking the rooms belonging to Rosalind and Makoto, but both were similarly deserted. Did something happen? The only potential threats in Samura were the doctor and the balladeer. Just as Luo Qing considered heading to the academia to investigate, he heard the front door creak open. Makoto entered first, her arm linked with Teresa's. Both women carried baskets filled with Samura's fresh produce. That's settled, then. You'll show me some new techniques tonight, sister, Teresa said with a playful smile. Of course, but don't forget about those outfits we discussed, Makoto replied, laughing lightly. Their cheerful conversation came to an abrupt halt when they spotted Luo Qing standing in the living room. You're back. Makoto's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Am I not allowed to come back? Luo Qing quipped, his gaze shifting between the two women. Despite Makoto's simulated mask, her distinctive violet eyes and long hair remained unchanged. Teresa, too, bore the same hair and eye color, though hers were complemented by a youthful, short-haired look. Standing together, the pair resembled a pair of sisters, a surreal sight considering Makoto's actual sibling was still in Inajima. What were you two doing? Buying groceries, obviously, Makoto replied nonchalantly, shaking the basket in her hand. She tugged Teresa past Luo Qing and set the basket on the dining table. Then, with a teasing grin, she tapped Luo Qing's nose. We're trying out some new recipes tonight, and you'll be our test subject. Luo Qing swallowed hard. She's way too flirty. You two seem close, Luo Qing muttered, eyeing their linked arms suspiciously. When did their relationship get this good? They're even holding hands indoors? Before he could press further, Teresa suddenly released Makoto and threw her arms around Luo Qing, wrapping him in an unexpected embrace. Teresa, what are you doing? Luo Qing asked, startled. Master. Teresa gazed up at him, her eyes seemingly brimming with affection. Luo Qing felt a jolt. Was it his imagination, or were those literal hearts in her eyes? My sister has already told me everything. Sister. Luo Qing turned to Makoto, momentarily stunned. She was covering her mouth, clearly amused. What did she tell you? Luo Qing asked, a sinking feeling in his chest. She said. Teresa blushed and lowered her gaze shyly. She said that I'm destined to be one of your future brides. Luo Qing froze. He turned back to Makoto, his expression one of utter disbelief. What exactly did you say to her? I didn't say anything untrue, Makoto replied with a smug hum. You know what you want, don't you? Luo Qing was at a loss for words. All right, Teresa, that's enough hugging, Makoto said, beckoning the girl. Come help me prepare dinner. Yes, sister. Teresa released Luo Qing and followed Makoto into the kitchen, leaving him standing alone in the living room. Watching their retreating figures, Luo Qing began to piece things together. So Makoto's starting to build her alliances, hey? She's positioning herself as the head wife. He couldn't help but admire her strategy. Still, the realization left him momentarily distracted, his earlier excitement about the feng shui hotspot completely forgotten. Night fell, and the first rays of moonlight spilled into the house just as Makoto and Teresa finished preparing dinner. The table was laden with a variety of dishes, a mix of Makoto's signature Inajimon recipes and a few newly learned Samura specialties. As for Teresa, Her contributions to the meal were minimal. She was more of a kitchen assistant, her cooking skills barely passable. The three of them sat around the table, Luo Qing at the head seat. As he glanced at Makoto, he still couldn't quite wrap his head around the situation. Where's the harem drama? The fiery rivalries? It's only been a month, and you've already subdued her? We worked hard on this meal. You're not going to just sit there and admire it, are you? Makoto teased, leaning forward slightly. Or are we so pretty you're already full just looking at us? Something like that, Luo Qing mumbled, diving into the food to avoid further conversation. To his credit, Makoto's cooking was leagues ahead of her sister's. So, why are you back already? Makoto asked. Where's Rosalind and the others? They're still wrapping things up in the desert. They'll return in a month. Ah, what a pity, Makoto said with a soft hum. Pity? What's a pity? Makoto's eyes sparkled with mischief as she glanced at Luo Qing. She felt a sense of satisfaction. Rosalind had already joined her side long ago. Now, Teresa was firmly within her camp. Her efforts to consolidate her influence were bearing fruit. Aside from those in Inajima, I've already secured most of the key players, she thought smugly. Out loud, she replied, it's just a shame we couldn't all sit down for a family dinner, don't you think? Family dinner? Chapter 207, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 207. After dinner, Luo Qing finally remembered his plan to find his feng shui hotspot for a critical task. Once Makoto and Teresa had finished tidying up the dishes, he sidled up to Makoto and whispered, "Can you come up to my room for a bit? I need to talk to you about something important." Something important? Makoto looked him up and down, a teasing glint in her eyes. Is it urgent? It's urgent. Well, if it's that urgent, go ask Teresa. She's free. I still need to finish knitting. I'll come up later, all right. As though placating a child, Makoto pinched Luo Qing's cheek gently. What are you even knitting? Luo Qing asked, his gaze falling on the ball of yarn in her hand. For you, obviously. Aren't you happy? She said with a wink. Luo Qing felt a pang of flustered embarrassment. Why is she so good at this? Wasn't Makoto supposed to be inexperienced in romance? Where on Teyvat did she learn to flirt like this? Come on, don't sulk, Makoto said, nodding toward Teresa, who was clearly trying to suppress her impatience. Look at Teresa, she's practically jumping out of her seat. Luo Qing's face darkened. That's not what I meant. Oh. Makoto raised an eyebrow, her hands still busy with her knitting. Then what do you mean? What could you possibly want this late at night? Luo Qing frowned. You know what? Never mind. Without another word, he scooped her up and slung her over his shoulder. Wah! Makoto's surprised yelp echoed through the house as Luo Qing carried her upstairs, leaving Teresa momentarily frozen in shock. By the time Teresa snapped out of it, Luo Qing was already halfway up the stairs with Makoto. Master! I can come too. Teresa called after him, her voice filled with eagerness. In Luo Qing's room, he placed Makoto on the bed unceremoniously, locking the door and drawing the curtains shut. Are we really doing this now? Though she usually carried herself with the confidence of a seasoned matriarch, Makoto's expression betrayed a hint of nervousness. Luo Qing sighed. Do you think the only thing on my mind is that? Isn't it? Luo Qing's frustration +1. All right, I was just joking. Come on, lie down, Makoto said, patting her lap invitingly. She knelt on the bed in her loose, pale lavender yukata. The motion exposed a generous stretch of creamy thigh, while her neckline dipped just enough to tease. How did you? Luo Qing hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had indeed planned to use her lap as his feng shui hotspot for tonight's pull session. Of course I knew, Makoto said with a sly smile. This isn't the first time you've come rushing to me for something like this, is it? Luo Qing felt a twinge of indignation. Having knowledge of the future really gives her an unfair advantage. Unwilling to let her have the upper hand, Luo Qing leaned in, cupped her face, and kissed her deeply. The kiss was long and fervent, leaving Makoto breathless by the time he pulled away. Her cheeks were flushed, and she was panting softly. You guessed right, Luo Qing said, his voice steady. I do want your lap. With that, he reclined onto her lap, closing his eyes. You're impossible. Though her tone was tinged with faux annoyance, Makoto's expression softened as she began to run her fingers through his hair gently. It's been so long since I've given him a lap pillow. Meanwhile, Luo Qing summoned the system's interface, taking a deep breath as the faint scent of cherry blossoms tickled his nose. All right. Let's do this. Golden Legendary, come to me. He began the poll session. One streak of light after another flashed across his vision. To his astonishment, golden light appeared on the 5th 10 pole. Wait, it worked. Luo Qing murmured in surprise. Makoto's lap had proven to be unexpectedly lucky. Perhaps this was what she meant when she said he would often return to her lap for draws in the future. Though he had used 50 wishes to obtain the golden item, it was still a far better result than his previous pity max pulls. The system chimed in his mind. Up pool updated. Please review the new item. Luo Qing opened the updated pool and found that the previously featured golden item, Seed of Nirvana, had been replaced. In its place was a new item, Authority the Void. The Void. The name struck a chord, tickling the edges of his memory. Curious, Luo Qing opened the description. Authority the Void, grants the user the ability to expand the scope of the void proportionally to their personal strength. Additionally, grants full and unrestricted access to the void's highest permissions. P.S. The void's maximum range can encompass all of Teyvat. Permissions include unrestricted administrative control, free from external influence. Luo Qing was speechless. For the first time, he had drawn an ability explicitly tied to Teyvat itself. But the void in Sumeru, isn't that just the internet? What would he even do with global void access? He needed power, something that could let him pin Raiden Shogun down without breaking a sweat. Sigh. I guess it's better than nothing. With a resigned shrug, Luo Qing used the remaining 40 pulls, hoping for another stroke of luck. Unfortunately, there was no golden glow in sight. When the session ended, Luo Qing reviewed the items he had received. Cryovision X1. Vision Binding Device X1. Substitute Doll X2. Affection Boost Card Pro Max X2. Interstellar Flush Toilet X2. None of it improved his combat capabilities. Why does this system keep giving me cryovisions? Does it think I'm collecting wives? Luo Qing opened his eyes, greeted by the sight of Makoto's chest obscuring his vision. For a moment, he felt utterly defeated. What's wrong? You look so upset, Makoto asked, her voice tinged with concern. Nothing. Luo Qing sat up, sighing. Just feeling a little unlucky. What do you mean by that? I mean, I'm a little pissed off right now. Oh? Want me to help you cool off? Makoto teased with a mischievous smile, arching a brow. She had heard this exact sentiment many times before. And she knew exactly what Luo Qing wanted when he said those words. Can you? Luo Qing asked, his tone hesitant but hopeful. In truth, his month in the desert had been filled with constant teasing from Bubble. While he had resisted her provocations, his pent-up frustration had only grown. I can. Makoto slid her arms around his neck, pulling him close. Her eyes gleamed with a rare sincerity as she whispered softly. If that's what you want, then any time is fine with me. Chapter 208, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 208. I don't get it. Luo Qing held Makoto close, still trying to process her sudden boldness. Did we really go through so much together in the future? Oh, we did. Makoto rested her head against his chest, her voice soft and playful. You were much more assertive back then, you know. Luo Qing hesitated briefly before remembering something. I've already kissed her, haven't I? Touched her too. There was no reason to back down now. With that thought, he gently tilted her chin upward and kissed her deeply. Makoto's arms wrapped around his neck as she responded eagerly, their passion heating the room. Makoto, now bound by the limitations of her mortal form, soon found herself exhausted. Nestled in Luo Qing's embrace, she drifted off to sleep like a contented violet kitten. On the other hand, Luo Qing, though fatigued from his journey, felt a surge of satisfaction. Finally, no longer a virgin. He glanced at Makoto's sleeping face, kissed her on the forehead, and held her tightly before closing his eyes to rest. Some time later, a dream began to take shape, vivid and familiar. When Luo Qing opened his eyes, he was greeted by a ceiling he hadn't seen in ages. This place. He sat up in bed, taking in the surroundings of a bedroom he hadn't inhabited for years. His hand reached out instinctively to the computer that had accompanied him through countless late-night battles. This is my old room. How is this possible? He clearly hadn't brought a void terminal with him when he went to sleep. How could he now be dreaming so vividly of his past life? If it feels this real. Muttering to himself, Luo Qing's gaze shifted to the powered-down computer. During his last dream visit to this world with Nahida, the authenticity of the recreated environment had left him shaken. If this dream had perfectly replicated his old world once again. After a moment of hesitation, he glanced around the room to ensure Nahida wasn't hiding nearby, then cautiously pressed the computer's power button. The hum of the fan filled the air as the triple monitor setup came to life, its screens glowing softly. It actually works. Luo Qing murmured, stunned as he stared at the familiar Eva-themed wallpaper on his desktop. The level of detail was uncanny. If not for his memory of exploring this world with Nahida, he might have believed he had somehow traveled back in time. If the systems booted up, maybe. His eyes fell on the icon for Genshin Impact, prominently featuring Paymon's grinning face. His hand hovered over the mouse. Let's see if I can. Before he could finish the thought, a soft, childlike voice chimed in from behind him. Hey? Luo Qing, where is this? Luo Qing's hand shot to the power button, shutting the computer down with record speed. He turned toward the voice, his heart racing. Sitting on his bed in a relaxed duck-like pose was Nahida, rubbing her eyes and taking in her surroundings with wide-eyed curiosity. Seeing Luo Qing's bewildered expression, she tilted her head and asked, Luo Qing, what's wrong? Nothing, he replied hastily. Damn it, why is she so adorable? Focus. Shaking his head, Luo Qing stepped in front of the computer, using his body to block it from Nahida's view. The thought of Nahida discovering that Teyvat was merely a game in his original world was too risky to entertain. This place. Nahida hopped off the bed, her ponytail swaying as she looked around curiously. Is this your home? You could say that. Luo Qing nodded, trying to change the subject. How did you end up in my room? Weren't you still in the streets last time? Well. Nahida lowered her head apologetically. When your dream bubble appeared again in the void, I couldn't resist coming to explore it. As for why I ended up in your room, I can only enter through areas close to the dreamer. I see. Luo Qing nodded thoughtfully, his gaze drifting toward the window as he considered how to guide Nahida out of the room. Keeping her here felt increasingly dangerous. Before he could say anything, Nahida suddenly asked, Luo Qing, is this your old home? Sort of. He hesitated, nodding slowly. As an orphan, Luo Qing had never referred to this place as home. It was just where he lived. A rented apartment, with no family to make it feel like a true home. This place is so simple and neat, Nahida remarked as she wandered through the room. She paused, looking up at him with a gentle expression. Luo Qing, if this is your dream, what about your parents? Where are they? Damn it. Exactly what I didn't want her to ask. Luo Qing hesitated for a few seconds before answering softly, I'm an orphan. Oh. Nahida froze, her expression falling. After a moment of silence, she walked over to him, her voice filled with regret. I'm sorry, Luo Qing. I didn't mean to. She struggled to find the right words, clearly unfamiliar with apologizing. It's fine, Luo Qing said, ruffling her hair with a small smile. It's all in the past. Besides, I don't live in this world anymore. Wait, that sounded weird. He shook his head and continued, anyway, I'm a Teyvatian now. No point dwelling on things that don't matter anymore. So don't worry about it. Nahida nodded, though the guilt lingered in her eyes. Determined to lift her spirits, Luo Qing decided to propose an outing. Well then, he said, why don't we pick up where we left off last time? There's still so much of this place to explore. Really? Nahida's mood brightened instantly. The idea of exploring this strange, fascinating world filled her with excitement. Just as they turned to leave, Luo Qing's movement exposed the still-lit monitor behind him. Hey? Luo Qing, why is this screen glowing? Nahida paused, her curious gaze fixed on the computer. Her eyes sparkled with intrigue, and it was clear she was completely captivated. What? Luo Qing turned to see his computer screen displaying his desktop wallpaper still powered on despite his earlier shutdown. Didn't I just turn it off? How is this happening? Chapter 209, this Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 209. As Luo Qing glanced at the monitor, his heart sank. In the bottom right corner, a notification popped up, displaying 4 words that explained everything: system successfully restarted. Damn it! He had clicked restart instead of shut down. What's this? Nahida's soft voice drew Luo Qing's attention back to reality. She tilted her head, staring curiously at the glowing screen. This is, Luo Qing hesitated, sweat forming on his brow. The computer was a symbol of modern society, and Nahida, being the god of wisdom, was bound to find it fascinating. It's called a computer, he explained reluctantly. A computer? Nahida blinked, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. But it doesn't look like a brain at all. Luo Qing was momentarily stumped. Does something need to look like a brain to be called a computer? What does it do? She turned her gaze to him, her expression practically screaming, "Tell me. I need to know." It's, Luo Qing gulped and tried to compose himself. It's a tool that helps people with work. It's sort of like the Void Terminal, but more basic. Oh. Nahida's excitement dimmed slightly at the mention of the Void Terminal, her expression growing subdued. Unlike the Void, though, Luo Qing added quickly, this doesn't require a vision or divine intervention. It's purely a product of human ingenuity. Without the help of gods. The words seemed to deepen her sadness, her expression visibly drooping. Damn it! Luo Qing sighed inwardly, realizing he had said the wrong thing again. That's not what I meant, Nahida, he said, gently ruffling her hair. This world doesn't have gods, he added, his tone softening. No gods. Nahida looked up at him, her expression filled with confusion. Then how did you end up in Teyvat? Since time immemorial, those who came to Teyvat from outside were powerful beings, often on par with gods themselves. Naturally, she had assumed Luo Qing was one such extraordinary entity. Well. Luo Qing thought back to the mud truck that had sent him barreling into Teyvat. He struggled to find an explanation. Maybe it's because I spent enough money back then. Hey! Nahida looked utterly baffled. Never mind, Luo Qing muttered, shaking his head. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. Nahida, how about we? Before he could finish, Nahida had already leaned forward, her tiny hands resting on the desk as she examined the monitor intently. The desk was taller than her small frame, so she had to stand on tiptoes, her chin barely clearing the edge. Her ponytail swayed as she turned her head toward Luo Qing, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Can I use it? For some reason, Luo Qing suddenly felt like a parent guarding their PC from a curious child. Well, technically, yes, he admitted. At this point, Nahida looked seconds away from plopping herself into his gaming chair. If he kept trying to distract her, it might only arouse her suspicion. Here, let me sit first, Luo Qing said. Okay. Nahida stepped aside, her excitement palpable. As he sat down, he noticed she was still standing by the desk, balancing on her toes with a hopeful expression. Do you want to sit with me? Luo Qing asked. Hey. Nahida tilted her head. But there's no chair left. It's fine, I can stand. Before she could finish her sentence, Luo Qing reached out, gently lifting her under her arms. Luo Qing. What are you? With ease, he settled her onto his lap. Relax, he said casually. It's just a dream, right? This way, you can see the screen better. Nahida's cheeks flushed as she fidgeted in his lap. Still. Taking advantage of her momentary bashfulness, Luo Qing swiftly dragged the Genshin impact icon into the recycle bin. Now then, let me show you how this works, Luo Qing said, moving the mouse. First, he tested the internet. It actually connects? He tried searching a few keywords. The results loaded, but many of the pages were blank. Figures. This dream must be limited by what I've seen or known in my past life, Luo Qing mused. Let's start with something simple. He muttered, typing Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf into the search bar. To his surprise, it pulled up videos. Looking at the interface, he hesitated for a moment before glancing down at Nahida. She was completely engrossed, her earlier embarrassment forgotten. Nahida. What is it? She tilted her head up at him, her eyes full of curiosity. Wanna watch a cartoon? A cartoon? This, Luo Qing said, clicking on a video. Music began playing through the speakers. Don't look down on me just because I'm a sheep. And so, the two of them began watching. When the episode ended, the screen transitioned to a familiar slew of advertisements. Are you a real brother? Come slash me. And where's the oily senior sister? Nahida. Seeing her frozen in place, Luo Qing poked her gently. Oh. Sorry, Luo Qing, I got a bit too absorbed. Nahida admitted sheepishly. What do you think? It's amazing, Nahida said, struggling to find words. The complexity and creativity behind such a device achieved without divine assistance left her in awe. How does it work? She asked eagerly. Well. Luo Qing scratched his head, realizing his own technical knowledge fell far short of explaining it. It's a long story, so let's save it for another time. Okay. Nahida nodded, though her curiosity remained. By the way, Nahida, Luo Qing said, a thought occurring to him. Could the Void Terminal play cartoons like this? Nahida tapped her chin thoughtfully. I've spent so much time in the sanctuary of Surasthana. I'm not sure what they've developed the Void Terminal into now. Her expression darkened slightly, so Luo Qing quickly changed the subject. Let's not worry about that. I'll show you something even cooler. Over the course of the night, Luo Qing discovered that the dream computer acted like a search engine for his own memories. Anything he'd encountered, even fleetingly, could be found here. From cartoons to old games, he shared a variety of nostalgic treasures with Nahida, who grew increasingly fascinated with every click. By the time dawn arrived, the dream began to dissolve. Luo Qing bid Nahida farewell before awakening in his room. When he opened his eyes, Makoto was still asleep in his arms. Reflecting on the strange but enjoyable dream, he smiled and gently brushed a hand through her hair. Suddenly, Makoto rolled over and clutched his arm tightly, her face scrunched in determination. This time, I got here first. You can't take it from me. Luo Qing blinked, completely baffled. Chapter 210, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 210. After a rather eventful night, Makoto was too exhausted to get up. Luo Qing decided to let her rest and left the room quietly. Since Makoto wasn't up to handle breakfast, the task fell to Teresa. She had spent the previous evening lingering outside their door, waiting for Luo Qing to come out for something mundane like a bathroom break. Instead, the two had gone at it all night. By morning, Makoto was still bedridden. Teresa, standing in the kitchen, cast a wistful glance toward the upstairs room. So envious. Finally, as she brought breakfast to the table, she hesitantly said, Master. Luo Qing looked up, noticing Teresa fidgeting. What is it? Can you pick me tonight? I've already prepared my outfits. Luo Qing froze mid-bite, staring blankly at her. What the hell? Where did she even learn words like that? Stop thinking about nonsense like that. I'm heading out for a bit. When Makoto wakes up, make sure she eats something. Oh. Teresa's head drooped, disappointment plain on her face. Figures. I'm still not a priority in his heart. After finishing breakfast, Luo Qing stepped out of the house and made his way toward the outskirts of Sumura City. Having spent over a month in the desert, it was time to check on the progress of the God creation plan under the doctor's supervision. He needed to ensure everything was on track. After all, he wasn't keen on personally clashing with Scaramouche unless absolutely necessary. Upon arriving at the Academia's research facility, Luo Qing was allowed through without issue. As the 12th Harbinger, his clearance was unquestioned. The central workshop was bustling with activity. Suspended in midair by heavy machinery, the Gnosis mech remained incomplete, its components being painstakingly pieced together. Once fully assembled, the next step would require the Heart of God to fuse Scaramouche with the mech, granting him unparalleled power. Well, well. Look who decided to drop by, came the doctor's voice. He stood at a console, monitoring the mech's progress. At the sight of Luo Qing, his lips curled into a faint smile. I've heard from Azar that you've been completely out of sight this past month. Just a little outreach work in the desert, Luo Qing replied nonchalantly, joining the doctor by the console to gaze up at the towering purple mech. How much longer until it's complete? Why? Are you in a hurry? The doctor shot him an amused glance. Somewhat, Luo Qing replied, his tone light but firm. I'd like to finish up here and return to Snezhnia for some well-deserved vacation. It's hot and humid here, and I'm not a fan. The doctor chuckled softly before replying, the final assembly should take no more than a month. After that, it's your turn to take the reins. Luo Qing nodded. The next phase required activating the void's full computational capacity, including harnessing the mental energy of Sumeru's citizens to finalize the fusion process. His role was to ensure Nahida didn't interfere. She won't interrupt, Luo Qing said confidently. My, such self-assurance, the doctor replied with a smirk. Shouldn't you be confident too? Luo Qing countered, his gaze drifting down to where Scaramouche supervised the Academia scholars. Do you think Her Majesty will let him march this thing into Inajima and start a fight with Raiden Shogun? That's not my concern, the doctor replied casually, glancing at the mech. His ambition is his own. All I want is to create it. Well, when Her Majesty comes down on you, don't drag me into it. I'm not taking the blame for this masterpiece. With that, Luo Qing waved dismissively and left the workshop. He'd seen enough. On his way out, Luo Qing remembered the empty matra position he'd been assigned as a cover. Maybe there's some work waiting for me there. Despite his initial hope that being an Academia matra might bring in some frustration value, it had turned out to be a dud. The Grand Matra rarely handed him actual assignments, and roaming around in uniform just to provoke people was far too inefficient. The only bright side was the chaos in the desert, where the Tanith tribe and Babel had provided him with a steady stream of frustration points. Maybe I should reward those tribes later. If they perform well and keep the frustration points flowing, I might even save them from Jet's blade. Arriving at his matra's office, Luo Qing noticed a stack of documents on his desk. Curious, he picked one up and found a mission briefing. Finally, an assignment? The briefing described a smuggling operation involving canned knowledge originating from Port Ormus. The Academia wanted available matras to investigate the flow of illegal goods. They must really be short on people to hand this to me. Port Ormus, hey. Luo Qing muttered. The trip would take days by normal means. Even with his accelerated travel ability, zero time, it would still take a full day. I'm a harbinger, not some Academia errand boy. He frowned, debating whether to take on such a mundane task. But then again, I don't actually know what this canned knowledge stuff is all about. Curiosity got the better of him. Might as well check it out. Returning home, Luo Qing decided to bring Teresa along. Someone had to act as his assistant, and with his other subordinates still stationed in the desert, Teresa was his only option. When he entered, Makoto and Teresa were hunched over the dining table, scribbling on something. At the sound of the door, they quickly pressed their bodies against the table to block his view. Hey! Don't you know how to knock? Makoto exclaimed, her cheeks turning pink. This is my house. You're my wife. And I have the key, Luo Qing replied smugly. Fine. You pass. Though she tried to act annoyed, Makoto was secretly pleased by the casual use of wife. If only he'd add first wife to that title. Teresa, take this upstairs, Makoto said, handing her a mysterious notebook. Got it. Teresa grabbed the notebook and turned to leave. Wait, Luo Qing interrupted. You're coming with me for a few days. Hey! Teresa froze mid-step, her expression shifting from shock to delight. Finally, my turn. And for several days. Is this real life? This is it, this is my moment. Chapter 211, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. Port Ormus. Under Luo Qing's time-efficient, full-speed travel, it took exactly a day to arrive at Port Ormus. As Sumeru's largest port, Port Ormus handled all sea trade connected to Sumeru, making it a hub bustling with foreign merchants far more than the city of Sumeru itself. However, due to the port's distance from Sumeru city, its law enforcement was notoriously lax. Mercenaries often gathered to stir up trouble, and smuggling was a common occurrence. Among the smuggled goods, the canned knowledge unique to Sumeru capable of granting instant expertise was a highly sought-after commodity. Luo Qing wasn't here to investigate the smuggling of canned knowledge to its roots, he simply wanted to understand what it was used for and whether he could produce some himself. By the time the two arrived at Port Ormus, it was already noon. Under Teresa's insistence, Luo Qing begrudgingly rented just a single room for their overnight stay. After lunch, Luo Qing glanced at the bustling docks and suddenly thought of a certain short-haired, lavender-haired little girl with a shrewd, merchant-like grin. Turning to Teresa, he ordered. Go take a look over there. If you spot a short-haired little girl with lavender hair and glasses, come back and find me. Ah! Teresa blinked, looking a little confused. My lord, do you mean an underage little girl? Probably. Why? My lord, interacting with minors in this way, that's illegal in Snezhnia. Teresa muttered hesitantly. What's in that brain of yours besides inappropriate thoughts? Luo Qing flicked her forehead. I'm heading this way. If you see her, report back to me. Understood, my lord. Teresa held her forehead, her shoulders drooping in a mix of embarrassment and slight hurt, as she trudged off in the opposite direction. So, my lord brought me along to work. She had thought. Maybe. After a few days, if they skipped protection, there might have been a chance to conceive. Elsewhere. Luo Qing had no idea what was running through Teresa's mind. Relying on his memories of the game, he headed toward the spot where Dory had once conned Lumen into buying canned knowledge. But the real Teyvat was vastly different from the game world, and Port Ormus, apart from its bridge, lacked any other distinct landmarks. After wandering for a while without encountering the lavender-haired merchant, Luo Qing debated whether to meet up with Teresa to check her findings. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something in a dark alley. A lavender-haired little girl was rubbing her hands together, talking with a burly man in the shadows, a sight that easily aroused suspicion. Sensing someone watching, the lavender-haired girl locked eyes with Luo Qing. That one glance seemed to freeze time. Not good. Law enforcement. Scatter. Before Luo Qing could react, the girl shouted, ditching the burly man and sprinting into the depths of the alley. Hey! Luo Qing was momentarily dumbfounded. Why is she running so fast? Do I really look like law enforcement? Glancing down, he suddenly realized. Damn it! He was still wearing his Matra discipline officer's uniform. No wonder. Meanwhile, Dory's instincts told her that a Matra officer had spotted her. Despite the suddenness, she didn't panic. Following her pre-planned escape route, she darted into narrow passages where only she could squeeze through, confident no adult could follow. After running for a while, she stopped, noticing no one was pursuing her. Phew, that was exhausting. Wiping sweat from her forehead, she muttered to herself, how was I exposed? My backup routes should still be secure. Just as she contemplated whether to investigate who had betrayed her, a male voice sounded behind her. So, you're the one selling canned knowledge? Dory spun around, startled, only to find the uniformed man somehow standing behind her. When did you? Answer my question first. You're the one selling canned knowledge, right? Luo Qing's tone was calm. Since she had already mistaken him for a law officer, he figured he might as well play along. Well. Smuggling canned knowledge was illegal. If caught, she'd have to surrender all her earnings and pay a hefty fine on top of that. For someone like Dory, whose sole life goal was to amass wealth, losing money was worse than death. That, big brother, I have no idea what you're talking about, she said in a coy voice, pretending to fidget shyly. I'm just selling fruit. Luo Qing was speechless. Why does she seem so eccentric? Answer properly, or I'll take you in. Okay. Seeing her act exposed, Dory dropped her pretense. Folding her arms, she said flatly. Name your price. How much to let me go? And if I name one, will you actually pay it? Dory's frustration +1. Why does he seem to know me so well? Don't worry. I'm not here to arrest you. Luo Qing's tone softened. Do you have any canned knowledge left in stock? Dory blinked in surprise. So he's here to buy canned knowledge? Then why did I even bother running? You're not baiting me, are you? She asked, leaning back tactically. Why would I? Fair point. In this shadowy alley, with just the two of them. If Luo Qing wanted to do anything to her, he wouldn't need to sweet-talk her first. He could have just taken action. Oh, you should have said so earlier, customer. Dory's expression shifted back to the shrewd merchant he had expected. Rubbing her hands together, she cheerfully presented a list. Lucky you, I just got a new batch in. Here's the catalog. Anything catch your eye? Spend over 1 million mora and I'll give you a 10% discount. To Dory, business was business, even if the client was law enforcement. These. Luo Qing scanned the list. Titles like fishing, from beginner to expert, mastering fried rice, and the art of being a scumbag left him unimpressed. This is it. Not what you're looking for. Dory's smile didn't falter. No problem, I've got something more impressive. She pulled out another list from her bag. Let's see. 100 ways to win a rich lady's heart, steel wool applications. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Ahem, customer, the content of canned knowledge isn't something I can control. Just tell me what you want, and I'll keep an eye out for it. Don't worry, I won't even charge you a high finder's fee. No need. Luo Qing shook his head. Do you have the device to produce canned knowledge? The device? Dory leaned back again, this time more cautiously. Customer, that comes at a whole different price. Chapter 212, this trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. So, you're saying you can get it, right? Luo Qing's voice was calm. He had a wealth of knowledge from his previous life, and if combined with the real-world dreams he experienced, extracting and utilizing this knowledge could prove immensely useful. I can, of course, but the price. Dory rubbed her hands together eagerly. The device for extracting canned knowledge was tightly controlled by the academia, making it nearly impossible for ordinary people to access. However, someone as well-connected and resourceful as Dory had her ways. You don't need to worry about that. Luo Qing casually pulled a bank check emblazoned with the insignia of the Northland Bank from his pocket and handed it to Dory. Write whatever amount you want. I won't stop you. Hey! Dory was momentarily stunned. She took a step back, giving Luo Qing a once-over. While his appearance was decent, the Wind Discipline officer uniform he wore hardly screamed wealthy elite. Yet here he was, offering such a grand gesture. Northland Bank. Dory accepted the gilded check and held it up to the sunlight, inspecting it carefully. Having done business with Snezhnayan merchants from time to time, she was familiar with Northland Bank checks. Only an elite few had access to these blank checks, allowing the holder to fill in any amount. And this one didn't seem fake. Is this guy really a Wind Discipline officer? Well then, rest assured, customer. My prices are always fair and reasonable. I guarantee you'll get your money's worth. Grinning, Dory tucked the check into her pocket. When can I expect the device? Luo Qing asked offhandedly, indifferent to how many zeros Dory might add to the check. As an operative, his funds were astronomical. Even if he ran out, he could always apply for more from headquarters. Mora was the least of his concerns. After all, earning Mora wasn't his responsibility. Why should he worry? This kind of thing is under tight scrutiny by the Wind Discipline officers. How about this? Give me your address, and I'll deliver it to you late tonight. Does that work? Dory's face lit up with her trademark business smile. She had always favored generous customers. By the way, may I have your name? I'm Dory, and there's nothing in Sumeru I can't procure. If you ever need anything else, feel free to find me. We'll talk about that later, Luo Qing replied, jotting down an address and handing it to her. The address was where he and Teresa were currently staying in Port Ormus, a modest one-bedroom suite. This inn, hey. Dory patted her chest with a confident grin. Got it, customer. I'll have it delivered tonight. You can count on me. Fine. See you tonight. Luo Qing nodded and left the alley. He trusted Dory's reliability. While she was undeniably a shrewd merchant, her reputation for fulfilling deals was solid. He wasn't concerned about her running off with the check either. Without his approval, the bank wouldn't release a single Mora. And if she did try to flee, she'd face a little punishment. Emerging from the alley, Luo Qing glanced toward the direction he had parted ways with Teresa. To his mild exasperation, he saw her standing by the riverside, holding 2 cups of milk tea, one in her hand and the other dangling by her side. Clearly, she hadn't taken his instructions seriously and had gone to a milk tea shop instead. She stood there aimlessly, pouting slightly, her violet eyes gazing around in search of him. Her petite figure swayed gently by the riverside. I'll admit, when she's not talking, she's actually quite nice to look at. Definitely my type. But the moment she opened her mouth, Luo Qing sighed and began walking toward her. However, he suddenly felt someone's gaze on him. Following his instincts, he looked toward the wooden bridge over the estuary. There, a man with short, gradient grey hair, wearing headphones and a sleek black and green outfit, was staring at him with a haughty expression. That's the academic prodigy. He's here too. Luo Qing smiled faintly at the man on the bridge. After a moment of thought, he raised his hand and flipped him off. On the bridge, Al-Haytham's brows furrowed. He hadn't expected Luo Qing to notice him. Given the height of the bridge, he should have been undetectable. How did this guy spot me so quickly? And what does that hand gesture even mean? Realizing he'd been exposed, Al-Haytham decided it wasn't worth continuing his observation and walked away from the bridge. Hey? Is he embarrassed? Luo Qing was mildly surprised to see Al-Haytham retreat so decisively. He had been planning to chat with the renowned scholar and see if he could provoke a reaction, but the man had left before he got the chance. Could he have sensed my overwhelming presence and chickened out? TCH, fine. Confirming there was no one else watching him, Luo Qing shook his head and made his way toward Teresa. Meanwhile, Teresa had belatedly realized that Luo Qing hadn't told her where to find him. Unlike the people of Sumeru, they couldn't communicate through the Akasha terminal, so after searching aimlessly for a while, she had returned to their meeting spot. Standing by the riverside for a while, her stomach started growling. That's when she ended up with 2 cups of milk tea, one for herself and one for Luo Qing. My lord! Spotting Luo Qing approaching, Teresa's face lit up. She waved at him with a bright smile, standing on tiptoes like she was greeting a boyfriend on a date. When he reached her, she handed him one of the cups. My lord, I got this for you, spicy flavor milk tea. It's so good. Spicy flavor? Luo Qing frowned slightly as he stared at the cup Teresa offered. I told you to go look for someone, didn't I? Well. Teresa hesitated, her voice small and guilty. I walked around, but I couldn't find the person you described, and then I got hungry. You're not going to drink it? Seeing that Luo Qing hadn't taken the milk tea, Teresa peeked up at him, looking sheepish. Next time we're on a mission, don't go buying random things. Luo Qing finally accepted the milk tea, though his expression remained stern. Hee, got it, my lord. Relieved that he hadn't scolded her, Teresa broke into a grin. In a burst of boldness, she looped her arm around his. So, my lord, what's next? I've already met the person. We'll head back to the inn to rest and wait for the delivery tonight. Once we get the goods, we'll leave. Back to rest? Sounds great. Teresa's thoughts drifted to the inn's large, comfortable double bed. Her heart fluttered with excitement. Her chance had finally come. Chapter 213, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. Nightfall, inside the inn. After spending some time resting in the inn during the afternoon, Luo Qing went out to wander around Port Ormus. He wanted to see if he could bump into Al-Haytham or other familiar faces, perhaps to foster some camaraderie, and collect more frustration points. Although the system backend still generated frustration points daily from the desert tribes, the pace had slowed significantly. At this rate, he estimated he'd only be able to get enough for another 50 wishes before the tribes fully accepted his loving tutelage and resigned themselves to their new destiny. By evening, he and Teresa had grabbed a casual dinner at a local eatery before returning to the inn to wait for Dory's delivery. Sumeru's cuisine emphasized cleanliness and simplicity, but for someone accustomed to the flavors of Liyue and Snezhnia, it was a bit underwhelming. The inn room was a modest one-bedroom suite with a small living area and a simple bathroom. With little else to do, Luo Qing sat in the living room, lost in thought, planning which of his mental knowledge to prioritize for transfer into canned knowledge. Meanwhile, Teresa sat on the sofa nearby, knitting a scarf she had learned to make from Makoto. She occasionally glanced at Luo Qing and then at the window, her mind wandering. It's getting so late already, yet my lord hasn't made a single move. Could it really be like my sister said that I have to make the first move to tempt him? Her eyes steeled with determination as she set down her yarn and needles. Standing up, she declared softly, My lord, I'll head to the room for a moment. Luo Qing absent-mindedly responded, still deep in his thoughts about canned knowledge. He didn't notice the fleeting glances she gave him or the small commotion from within the bedroom. Or perhaps he noticed but simply didn't care. A moment later, the door creaked open, and Teresa reappeared. My lord. What is it now? Luo Qing began, but the words caught in his throat. Standing before him, Teresa wore tight, low-cut hot pants with the zipper halfway down, revealing a snow-white high-cut bodysuit underneath, exposing her slender waist and pale skin. Her upper body was adorned with a custom-fitted crop top, accentuating her already curvaceous figure. Most strikingly, she was barefoot. Luo Qing was utterly speechless. Who told Teresa about my preferences? Her outfit was practically a full-on rave in his personal interest zone. And where did she even get such an outfit? Makoto again. It seems you like it, my lord. Noticing the subtle gulp Luo Qing couldn't suppress, Teresa knew her carefully planned outfit had hit its mark. Sister really does understand him best. My lord, it's already so late. Before he could respond, Teresa took a bold step forward, sitting on his lap in a duck-like kneel. Wrapping her arms around his neck, she leaned close to his ear, her voice soft and enticing. Why don't we go to the bedroom to rest? Tonight, you can play as late as you like. Happiness of this kind, there's no going back once you've tasted it. Since experiencing it for the first time, Luo Qing found his tolerance for restraint in this area significantly diminished. After all, he was no longer a virgin. Proudly noted. Get off me for a moment. It wasn't that Luo Qing wasn't tempted. But Dory hadn't delivered the goods yet. If they got interrupted halfway, it'd be too awkward. Why, though? Teresa's voice was as soft as a stream of melted sugar. Don't you like my outfit, my lord? Too bad, because I'm not waiting. I want you now. With that, Teresa buried her face into Luo Qing's neck, trailing kisses along his skin. It was part of a strategy Makoto had taught her, a surefire way to conquer Luo Qing. Just go all in, he can't resist. We're in the living room. Luo Qing protested weakly. It doesn't matter where, does it? Ignoring his protests, Teresa's hands began working at his belt. Just as Luo Qing reached out to stop her, a knock came from the door. Who's there? Luo Qing called out toward the door. Teresa, however, didn't stop her teasing, clearly enjoying the added thrill of being interrupted. Knock it off. The delivery's here. Lifting Teresa effortlessly, Luo Qing set her down on the sofa and adjusted his disheveled clothing before heading to the door. Opening it, he found Dory standing there in a dark brown hooded cloak. Her petite figure was dwarfed by the massive backpack she carried. Customer, I've brought your goods. Dory's signature sly smile greeted him. But mid-sentence, her eyes fell on Luo Qing's slightly rumpled clothes and haphazardly fastened pants. Then Teresa appeared in the doorway behind him. Her scanty outfit was disheveled, her face flushed, and her demeanor, utterly incriminating. Well, damn. This one's heavy duty. And it's barely even night. Did I come at a bad time? Dory asked, hesitantly. No. Come in, Luo Qing replied calmly, motioning for Dory to enter while throwing a pointed look at Teresa to fix her outfit. Dory glanced into the room, her expression wary. She might be greedy for Mora, but she wasn't about to risk everything for it. Luo Qing caught the unease in her gaze and clarified, don't overthink it. I only want the device. Returning to the living room, he gestured for Dory to follow. After a brief pause, Dory took a deep breath and tiptoed inside. Here it is, customer, the latest canned knowledge device from the Academia. Not only can it extract your thoughts and memories into canned knowledge, but it can also draw directly from ley lines to create it. Truly a must-have tool for any adventure. Once Dory started her sales pitch, she completely switched modes, paying no mind to whatever Luo Qing and Teresa might have been up to moments ago. All this for a fair price, just 60 million Mora. Not bad, right? How does it work? Luo Qing asked, examining the device, still unsure of its functionality. It's simple. Just prepare an empty canned knowledge capsule, wear the device, and focus on the memory you want to store. The machine will handle the rest. Oh. Luo Qing considered for a moment before handing the device to Teresa. You try it. Hey? Me? Teresa blinked in surprise, taking the device reluctantly. She turned to Dory for clarification. Are you saying it can store anything? Even things that haven't actually happened? Yep, Dory confirmed. The device pulls images and memories from your mind. As long as the details are vivid and clear, even imagined scenarios can be extracted. In that case, let me try. Excited, Teresa eagerly put on the device and closed her eyes. After a few moments, the machine emitted a faint green glow. Energy flowed through its emerald circuits and into a canned knowledge capsule. All done. Your memory is now stored, Dory announced, removing the finished capsule and handing it to Teresa. You can use an Akasha terminal to absorb it and compare it to what you envisioned. A blush spread across Teresa's face as she glanced at Luo Qing. How about, my lord tries it first? Chapter 214, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. Luo Qing glanced at the canned knowledge in his hand, then at Teresa, whose face was flushed red, her knees pressed tightly together. He had a pretty good idea of what was in it. But to confirm, he'd have to inspect it himself. After a few moments of hesitation, he began absorbing the knowledge. In the blink of an eye, vivid scenes flooded his mind. He and Teresa, in the living room, the bedroom, the bathroom, even the balcony. An intense, unrestrained, passionate battle lasting 800 rounds. It was absurd. Luo Qing frowned and turned to Teresa. Where did you learn all these positions? He. Teresa assumed Luo Qing was praising her and shyly lowered her head. As long as you like it, my lord. Luo Qing was at a loss for words, unsure how to communicate with his zealous subordinate. Well, customer? The device works as advertised, right? Dory rubbed her hands together eagerly. Though she was young, the earlier conversation and Teresa's suggestive outfit made it pretty clear what kind of knowledge had been stored. If she could sell something like that herself, she could fetch a premium price. It works. Luo Qing nodded, his feelings mixed. The canned knowledge felt as real as if he had lived it. Those moments with Teresa. If there's no problem. Dory extended her small hand toward Luo Qing with a businesslike grin. Let's shake on it. I look forward to working with you again. Luo Qing gave her a quick handshake, and Dory wasted no time slinging her oversized backpack over her shoulders and hurrying out the door. This place was too dangerous for a cute little merchant like her. Better safe than sorry. She sure can run fast. Luo Qing glanced at the door, then at the extraction device on the table. He recalled the time he and Nahida experimented with dreams. In the dream world, he could access a computer and revisit everything he had ever experienced, every anime frame, every novel passage, even those risque. Well, he didn't search for those in front of Nahida. He had only tested it with something like Yusuge no Sora. If he could turn everything from his dreams into canned knowledge and sell it. Luo Qing felt like he'd stumbled upon a goldmine for generating frustration points. I wonder if Sumura scholars and citizens would be into sibling love. Maybe sprinkle in some shocking bull drama. But then another problem arose: how could he extract dream content into the real world? While he mulled it over, a sudden weight pressed down on his lap. Luo Qing looked up to find Teresa perched on him again, arms wrapped around his neck. My lord. Teresa whispered in his ear. All those positions you just saw? I've already practiced them all. Luo Qing was momentarily speechless. What was it like to have a subordinate utterly obsessed with seducing you? Then again, if this had happened to the Luo Qing from his previous life, he would have laughed himself awake from sheer happiness. No one's going to interrupt us now, my lord, Teresa murmured, her voice silky as she leaned against him. My lord, take me, won't you? I don't care about status or titles. It can just be our little secret. Whenever you want. I'm always ready. Even if all Luo Qing desired was her body, she wouldn't mind as long as she could stay by his side. Luo Qing struggled to respond. Teresa's words revealed a complete lack of pride or reservation. What did I ever do to deserve this? Aren't you afraid you'll regret this? Of course I am, Teresa said, pouting slightly. But I'm more afraid of you leaving me behind. Fine. Luo Qing sighed, muttering under his breath. Words too big. Bear with me. It was a night of long-awaited relief, a night of unbridled passion. As Teresa had claimed, she had indeed prepared well. Luo Qing found that with just a glance, Teresa seemed to know exactly what to do next. The experience was overwhelmingly satisfying. However, like Makoto before her, Teresa's stamina paled in comparison to Luo Qing's. By the latter half of the night, she had fallen asleep in his arms, completely exhausted. Lying on the bed, Luo Qing reflected on how he had met Teresa. Had he not arrived when he did, she might have perished during Child's Oziel incident. Who would have thought that this usually wild and scatterbrained girl would be so devoted and still a virgin? When he first met her, he had assumed she was the type to play around and have a different guy every night. After some thought, fatigue began to creep in. Pulling Teresa closer, Luo Qing gently cradled her. Before drifting off, his gaze landed on the extraction device. Suddenly reminded of his plans, he reached for it, placing it on his head. His vision blurred, and the boundary between reality and dreams dissolved. When his awareness reassembled, he found himself back in his bedroom. So dreaming always brings me back here, hey? Luo Qing was surprised. This was his third time in this dreamscape. Weren't dreams supposed to be illogical and fragmented? Looking around, he noticed Nahida was absent. It seemed she wasn't interested in visiting his dream tonight. Perfect timing. Luo Qing hurried to his computer, pulling up the search engine. He typed in keywords enthusiastically. School days. Yusuga no Sora. No, too sweet. I can't spoil them. Let's try something else. Clannad. Yeah, that'll work. Familiar anime scenes populated his browser, but a new issue quickly surfaced. He could access the content, but how was he supposed to extract it into canned knowledge? He was still dreaming. As he pondered this, a familiar voice broke the silence. Luo Qing, why are you up so late? He turned to see Nahida sitting on his bed. With a light hop, she leapt to the floor. I had some urgent business to take care of, Luo Qing replied. Business? Nahida tilted her head in curiosity. Yeah, the kind that'll explode if left undone. Explode? Nahida didn't quite understand but decided not to press further. Luo Qing often said strange things, and she had learned to shrug it off. Her attention shifted to the computer screen. Luo Qing, what's this? Ah. Luo Qing glanced at the screen. Fortunately, the anime covers looked innocuous enough, betraying none of their deeper content. These, Luo Qing said, placing a solemn hand on Nahida's shoulder, are highly educational stories from my past life. Nahida, could I ask you for a favor? Chapter 215, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. What favor? Nahida averted her eyes shyly under Luo Qing's direct gaze. Help me activate my canned knowledge extraction device. Please. Luo Qing said earnestly. Hey. Nahida tilted her head in confusion. Luo Qing, you want to extract things from this dream into canned knowledge? Exactly. I want to give it a try. Nahida hesitated. The creation of canned knowledge was strictly regulated by the Academia, and as the god of wisdom, helping Luo Qing might be seen as bending the rules. This might be a bit. Nahida. Sensing her hesitation, Luo Qing gently placed his hands on her small shoulders, his eyes narrowing slightly as he spoke in a soft, coaxing tone. You wouldn't want anyone finding out that you've been sneaking into my dreams, would you? Eek. Nahida was startled, her expression one of sheer disbelief. Was Luo Qing threatening her? But just a few days ago, he had been so kind and gentle. If you help me, Luo Qing continued with a mischievous grin, I'll let you come into my dreams anytime you want. Well. Nahida's expression grew even more conflicted. It was true her curiosity about Luo Qing's dreams was immense. Otherwise, she wouldn't sneak into them every time he drifted off. Fine, but I'll need to see what you're trying to extract first, Nahida said firmly, setting her final boundary. That's. Luo Qing hesitated. Clannad wasn't an issue, but school days and Yusuga no Sora? Those might be unsuitable for Nahida. Of course. He quickly queued up Clannad on the screen. Here, you can't watch like that, sit on my lap. Hey. Before Nahida could react, Luo Qing lifted her up and placed her on his lap, the scene looking exactly like a father and daughter watching cartoons together. As the familiar music began to play, Nahida was immediately captivated. Her small head leaned forward in curiosity, her emerald green eyes wide with rapt attention, unwilling to miss a single frame. When the episode ended, Luo Qing swiftly closed the player. Well, Nahida? Any issues with it? Luo Qing, can I watch one more episode? You'll need to activate the extraction device for me first. Nahida hesitated. Just one more episode first, Luo Qing offered, hitting play again before she could resist. He was confident that once her curiosity was piqued, she wouldn't be able to hold back. There was no way she could resist. Time passed, and the second episode concluded. Luo Qing immediately closed the browser and turned to her. So, Nahida, will you help me now? If you do, there's plenty more for you to watch. He dangled the bait with relentless charm. Sitting on his lap, Nahida hesitated a while longer before finally nodding. Alright, fine. After all, it was just an anime. Surely there wouldn't be any harm in helping him extract it. Thank you, Nohida. You're the best, Luo Qing said, ruffling her hair affectionately. Wait a moment, Nohida replied, her form dissolving into a streak of light as she left Luo Qing's dream. Back in the inn, the faint green glow of the Akasha terminal on Luo Qing's head flickered. Nohida's consciousness moved into the real world, arriving in his room. This must be it. She looked at the extraction device on the bedside table, ready to activate it. But a soft murmur caught her attention. Glancing down, she saw a purple-haired girl lying naked against Luo Qing's chest, both of them completely unclothed. The girl's lips were parted in a blissful smile, drooling as if lost in a particularly pleasant dream. Nohida's pupils dilated. Her small head was hit with a tidal wave of revelation. As the god of wisdom, she didn't need much evidence to deduce what had happened between them. The crumpled tissues in the wastebasket told the rest of the story. So this was the urgent business Luo Qing had to take care of. But Luo Qing was an adult, after all. Such things were normal. Steeling herself, Nohida calmed her inner turmoil and activated the extraction device. Just as she prepared to return to his dream, her curiosity got the better of her. The purple-haired girl's blissful expression and continuous drooling intrigued her. What kind of dream could make someone this happy? Unable to resist, Nohida's consciousness slipped into Teresa's dream. She found herself in a snow-covered city. This is Snezhnia, she realized, glancing around. Peeking through a nearby window, she froze. In front of a roaring fireplace, a man and a woman were engaged in unspeakable activities. They were both completely exposed, experimenting with techniques that left Nohida utterly stunned. The woman was Teresa. The man, unsurprisingly, was Luo Qing. No wonder she was drooling so much. Nohida gulped, her mind whirling with a mix of emotions she couldn't quite place. She had known such things were normal, but seeing it firsthand. Her first-hand experience left her unsettled and confused. I'd better not disturb her. Deciding this dream was best left unexplored, Nohida exited Teresa's subconscious, vowing never to return. When she re-entered Luo Qing's dream, her expression remained complicated. I've activated the device, she informed him. Nohida, is something wrong? Luo Qing asked, noticing her unease. Nohida hesitated before asking, that girl, is she your wife? Girl. Luo Qing paused, then remembered. Ah, right. Before falling asleep, he and Teresa had gotten a bit carried away. Nohida must have seen something. Sort of, Luo Qing replied, scratching his head. Sort of. We're not officially married, yet. Oh. Nohida lowered her gaze. Well, Luo Qing, I should go. Let's save the rest of that Clannad anime for another time. Before he could respond, Nohida vanished in a flash of light, leaving his dream. Meanwhile, Luo Qing had a good idea of what Nohida might have seen. It's fine, she's still a kid. She'll get over it. Shrugging it off, he turned his attention back to his dream. Time to see if there's another heartwarming anime worth extracting. When morning came and the dream dissolved, Luo Qing slowly opened his eyes. Something wet and sticky greeted him. Looking down, he found his chest covered in drool. Teresa, wake up. What is it, my lord? Teresa rubbed her eyes sleepily, sitting up in a duck-like squat on his stomach, still entirely unclothed. My lord, are you in the mood for a morning round? T/N, poor Nohida, sad face, thank you so much for being here. This bonus chapter is like a little sprout brought to life by all the warmth and encouragement you've given. WiseTL is so grateful to have such wonderful readers who help these stories grow into something even more beautiful. If you'd like to sprinkle even more sunshine and rain onto this garden of dreams, you can visit patreon.com/wisetl right bracket. Every little bit helps the flowers bloom brighter. With love, Nohida Seedling.
Thanks for listening.